game. Let's look at Aronian, because he's old and he won. He's playing Vincent Keymer, who's young and obviously not afraid of Aronian or anybody. And this game took over 6.5 hours. And typically, if you told me a 40-year-old is going to beat a teenager and they're both 2,700, I would predict it was a long, tedious endgame where he was slowly outplayed, and that's what it was. So, prediction correct. Okay, so they played 1,000 moves of theory in a Ruy Lopez. Always a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love to turn in 30.
What's funny is, I think this is Magsudlu's game that he lost to Abdusattorov, except I think Magsudlu played b5 and the pawn was already on c3 and he played bishop c2. So I think Abdusattorov was a tempo ahead of Aronian's position. Okay, rook e8. Bishop, he played h6. Always play bishop f8. Now, normally when white plays d4 in one move instead of in two, and black plays the Zaitsev-Smyslov variation, which this would be in that instance, the point of playing rook e8, bishop f8 quickly is to not play h6, especially since the bishop's not on b3, so there's no knight g5. And you want to play bishop b7 early so you can put pressure on this pawn. And then he can't play knight f1 because the pawn on e4 is going to be hanging to all these things. That's the point of the Zaitsev. And instead, white gained a tempo by not going here and then here, by going here in one move. And white lost a tempo by playing d3, then d4. So I think this is a direct transposition to the Smyslov variation, which hasn't been popular since like the 60s. So this is unusual for black to play in such a way, because this is considered sort of passive. Okay, bishop b7, and the idea is if you play knight f1, you can't play knight f1. Because now I have the three amigos here, and the engine already says black's better. Thanks, Stonkfish. You take on d4. If you play the obvious cd, then knight b4, and we're threatening this, and this, and this, and this. And the reason we're doing all that is because the knight's not on d2 defending the e-pawn. We can just play bishop b1 here. So that's the whole point of the Zaitsev-Smyslov kind of variation. Now, since the bishop is already on b7, now white can successfully play d5, which is what Aronian did. Knight goes to b8, the knight wants to go to d7, and he wants to play c6. If the bishop was on c8, then our bishop has a nice diagonal here. It's blocked by the pawn. And since black hasn't played c5 yet, he's going to play c6. And we see this in the Breyer variation, which I'm not allowed to play because I'm a vegan. Did they get it?
I didn't get it.
Breyer ice cream.
Oh. Oh, Bonarici got it. I didn't get it.
Mm-hmm. It's boring ice cream.
I was trying to think.
Ice cream's supposed to be
like
exciting.
What animal it sounded like, or what meat.
Who invented the Jobava London? The city of London. Breyers has a vegan option. All right. Okay. So he played b3 ostensibly to play c4 and tighten up the d5 square after c6. And also you get connect 4 in case you're doing that. So this is a slow, methodical maneuvering game, which is advantage Aronian because he's older than his opponent. Knight bd7. And also, Aronian plays the Ruy Lopez with black. So he has experience with both sides of these positions. c4, c6. And, Karpov made a living in the 70s and early 80s winning these kinds of positions for white. Knight f1, remaneuvering the knight. Black played a5, engine approved. Bishop e3, a4, engine approved. h3. Now this is actually funny. The engine wants to move the rook away from the a file, which is weird because that's going to open up soon. So h3 makes more sense to me, stopping knight g4. A-B, rook takes, queen takes. By the way, this is the first time I've seen this game. I'm like you, I haven't seen that. And the engine says black has equalized. Queen c7. Black looks a little passive to me. Queen a5. Knight g3. b4, closing up the queen side. Black dominates the a file, the only open file. Knight to e1. He wants to play knight d3. And then perhaps at a later point, f4. Attacking the center, pawn break, etc. Knight c5, never play f3. So he played rook d1. The engine played f3. Never play f3. Knight f5. And now this is a good question for the audience. And since Karen's here, she's part of the audience. And she's streaming. Would you take with the rook, the pawn on e4, or the pawn on c4? And the engine says one loses, one's equal, and white's better after one. So that's a pretty good question. This is the kind of position that would be in the Perelstein book. Which way would you,
Right.
with Nate Solon.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I would want to take with one of the pawns.
Right, taking with the rook just loses the rook. That was like a joke.
Right.
That was like
okay.
a joke.
I mean, I don't like opening up the c file because then the bishops can get attacked by the rook.
Mm-hmm.
But then it seems hard to bust through if you don't take with c take. I think c takes.
Right, the engine says c takes is equal. And then after e takes, which was played, white's better because we open up the bishop.
Oh, okay, yeah. I see that now.
Mm-hmm. And if I was playing white, I would probably take with the e pawn just to open up my bishop. But I wouldn't know it was right. I'm sure Aronian knew it was right. I would be like, I guess I'll put up my bishop. I don't know. I hope it's better than this. I don't know. Okay, so he took with the e pawn. Bishop c8. He didn't like his bishop, hammering against this. So he thought his bishop was better here. Bishop to d2, putting pressure here. Knight f6. Knight goes back to g3. And white's just better because white has more space. And earlier in the game, the last 5 moves, the engine wanted black to trade queens and thought black was equal. But now it seems like white's getting the advantage. We have to take the knight because our pawn is attacked. And that was a nice knight. That was a beautiful knight. And the engine doesn't like that move at all. It wants to play the fairly obvious, in my opinion, knight d7 to play knight c5. Knight's good on c5. But he played here, which I don't like. Bishop f5. Engine doesn't like that move either. He wants to trade the white square bishop, so his knight has all these good squares, and then black's left with this sorry bishop behind his pawns. Although often the bishop can go to b6 and be pretty good. Bishop e8. So the engine doesn't like the moves the players are playing. It doesn't like here. It doesn't like bishop e8. It likes bishop b1 a lot. So now white's going to play queen c2 and knight h5 and give a checkmate. I would say checkmate, but the Soviet players who are better than me say a checkmate. So they're stronger than me. So what do I know? Bishop d7. f4. Finally, he opens it up. And the engine says, boo, you shouldn't open it up. But it puts pressure on black to play like really accurately here. And black immediately made a mistake. Queen a3 is the engine move. And this is actually very funny. Look at this engine line that no human would think of. Queen a3. So we play queen c2 and keep our attack. And now a move that would be very hard to find for a human. And you're a human, so I can't let you find it. Bishop a4. And then you can't defend your pawns. You have to take, and you take here. And the engine says either white's better or it's equal. It can't decide. I think it prefers white. I would definitely take white here, although my king is a little funny. Yeah, it's saying it's about equal, but I would take white. 2 bishops and, probably win a pawn somehow. Okay, so he played rook e8. The engine says that's terrible. Why is the rook on e8? He thought the file would open later, so I might as well have my rook on e8. But he's giving up his play on the a file. Now his queen is misplaced. Rook f1. The rook's better on f1 than d1, obviously. Bishop d8, which I suggested earlier to get the bishop to a good square. fe. Queen check. And it's funny, whenever I have this decision in my games when I was a good player, thanks GM Gascon for rating with 1022 personnes.
Yay, thank you for
I
the
just
raid.
assume you must be French because look at your name. Probably you're like from South America, show me.
Yay, thank you.
Anyway, merci pour le, raid, etc. Et maintenant, the stream français seulement. Je parle français et désolé if you don't speak French. Sorry. Okay, so in this position, what? Okay, so in this position, when I have black, I'm like embarrassed because I don't know which way is right. And if I think for 10 minutes, which I might, then the guy knows me. He doesn't know which way is right. And to them, it might be obvious. And they're like, man, this guy sucks. If you move too quickly, you might make the wrong one. Now, what's funny about this is white is better after either recapture. White's just better here. White's outplayed black. And he played the one that's much worse. So even when you're 2,700, you still don't know which way to recapture. You're guessing. You use your judgment from previous, experience. Which way would you take, with the pawn or the rook? He chose the wrong one. So if you choose the wrong one, then you play like a 2,700. Choose the right one, then you're right and better than 2,700. So you win either way. It's Pat. Gascon means boy. That's a good reference to Pulp Fiction. It's a misquote, but still good.
I mean, I don't see any reason to take with the rook.
So you take with the pawn.
Yeah.
Correct. Pawn takes is correct. And the reason pawn takes is correct is you want to use that pawn to get counterplay. But probably black said, I don't want white to have 2 connected passed pawns. I don't want my rook blocked, so he took with the rook. Young players like to play actively. Like, ooh, look at my rook. It's active. And now white has no passed pawns. So that's probably what he was thinking. Okay, unfortunately, this gives away the f4 square, so I have bishop f4 kicking your rook. And then his rook went back to where it once belonged. Queen d2. And black just doesn't have a lot of play here. Black's very passive. White's totally dominating on the king side and in the center. White's pawn majority is a good pawn majority. Black's 3-2 is irrelevant. In fact, it's good that white doesn't have an f-pawn because his rook is active. So he played h5, which is not something probably most people would consider. However, h5 is the engine move. He wants to play h4, kicking the knight, and he wants to stop this sacrifice. Bishop takes, queen takes, and the rook's here, and the bishop's here, and the knight's here. h5, very good.
Hey, Corbla, how's it going?
Now, the reason h5 is bad, if it's bad, is because it gives away the g5 square. So he played bishop g5, immediately punishing that. And sometimes I'm going to sacrifice on f6 and open up your king and totally checkmate you. It'll be totally awesome. Played h4. And after he took the pawn, the bishop isn't controlling e3 anymore. So he plays queen e3. Engine approved. Engine says h4 is right, queen e3 is right, and black has counterplay now. Takes, takes. This pawn needs to be protected on b3. Rook f3, engine approved. Takes, takes. And now we have a pawn up endgame, which white is winning, which will take 1,000 moves. And when they stopped the game here and they were interviewing Aronian, and he said, I'm a pawn up, I have to win in 1,000 moves. That's just my game. What movie?
I don't know.
Pulp Fiction. Play for Blood? That's just my game. I was only fooling. I wasn't. So this is a winning position for white, but it'll take a long time. And this is a pet peeve I had when I was a chess coach. A lot of lower rated players would agree to a draw here with white. And when I'm like, why'd you agree to a draw when you're pawn up? They would always say the same thing. Always. I didn't know how to win. And the way to learn how to win is to agree to a draw. And then I quit teaching. And then Aronian agreed to a draw, saying he didn't know how to win. No, that's not what happened. Also, nobody knows how to win. You're up a pawn, so you play until you win. Sometimes you're pawn queens. Okay, so black played bishop e7, which unpins his knight, sort of. Okay, now, in this position, if it was black to move, I said if. Black could play knight takes d5. Tricky. Recommended by Run DMC. Okay, and with the bishop on d8, you can't do that. Right. So now knight e4 you're not worried about because you could just take this. Okay, so he played bishop f5. He wants him to take, and then knight takes, attacks the bishop. And I'm threatening to take this, and your knight's pinned. So bishop f5, good. Bishop e8, always retreat. Okay, and now you can play knight e4. I don't know if he did. No. Okay, you can play knight e4, and if you play this, which was the trick that worked last time, now when I take on d6, I gain a tempo, attacking the bishop, and I have a passed c pawn. So this should be winning for white. So he didn't play knight e4. He took the bishop. He took the knight. You have to take with the bishop. And then he played f4, so the bishop can't go anywhere. And now he's going to play knight e4 and have the great knight. g6, knight e4. Obviously, if you take, I take, and I win the king and pawn endgame because I have a passed pawn here, and I create another passed pawn here. Which I don't have to do that, but... Right, and then we have this great knight. We have the 3-2 majority. These bishops are passive. In fact, that bishop's trapped on e8. Terrible. So he plays f5, kicking out the knight, giving his bishop a square. Knight f2, it's going to d3. If I could play knight d3 now, I said if, then you can't defend your b pawn. So he played here. That way he can defend his b pawn. Boo, bishop a5. Ugh. Okay, you ever seen such two sad bishops?
Oh, yeah.
I showed this to Trump, and he said those are sad.
Oh, somebody was asking who this is between. I didn't even notice that you don't have the...
Oh, I put it on the wrong one.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That was on Analysis Multiple Games. It should have been on Chess.com events. I clicked the wrong thing.
Darn.
Aronian's white and Keymer's black, or Keymer. Depends on who you ask.
All right, you should be able to see it now. Sorry about that, guys. Thanks for asking who the game
Aronian. Okay. King g3, moving the king up. Move it on up. He's just having fun moving his pieces around, not doing anything. He's never had so much fun. Black has some counterplay with g5, so he stops it. Making him suffer, torturing him. And finally, he breaks on through to the other side. So he plays h5. Obviously, if I play h6, I'm probably going to win. And if you take the pawn, I'm going to take the pawn on f5, and my king can walk in, and I have a passed f pawn. So h5 is very strong. He takes, gets his knight to a good square. Now his king can walk in. Christopher walk in. And this is just black not resigning. Bishop g6 is good. If you take and I take back, your king can't approach, and my king just takes this. Obviously, if you take the quote-unquote free pawn, you lose. So he plays king h4. He wants to take with the king. Now, that's a dominating knight, and that is a terrible bishop. And then he resigned. And the engine says +9 for white. White's going to play bishop here, and then walk his king in, and so forth. So if you told me a 40-year-old beat a teenager, and they're both 2,700, I would be like, yeah, that's equal position. He outplayed him strategically. Keymer wasn't very good being passive, and eventually Aronian broke through. And that game was like 6 hours and 40 minutes. Now, nowadays, you can't beat people like that. Like Keymer and Praggnanandhaa play just as good as anybody when it's 6 hours old. But Aronian's having a good tournament, and unlike 2022 when he did not. Now, I can be wrong, and I will be corrected by the chat. And people on YouTube will be like, you idiot. If I understand things correctly, which I don't say I do, I think Aronian just had a baby.
Oh, really?
Like in the last 2 months.
You mentioned that before, and I forgot.
Yeah, I think Aronian just became a dad.
Oh, good.
So he did it for his son. Or daughter, I don't know. Yes, he did.
He did? That's
He was
awesome.
pregnant? He was. Yeah, he thought so long on move 20 was a pregnant pause.